As my
Oh.
85-year-old Italian mother would say, this is the world that we live in. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And by the way, Bill Maher, conservatives need to stop looking at people who hate them as heroes of any kind. Bill Maher says, well, we should be for the First Amendment. Thanks, Bill. We already knew that. It's your people who want to attack the First Amendment. As far as Kamala, that's Kamala acting black. That's her reminiscing back in the day when she was doing her thing in the club before she started betting down Willie Brown and deciding to rise through the ranks of California politics. Okay, so that's typical of her. And Biden crawling along, slugging his way inch by inch
Oh.
along the sand. Joe, this isn't the world that we live in right now. I mean, seriously.
Oh, I
Seriously.
don't know
Well,
what to say.
it really is. Well, we have a great show for you tonight. We're going to go all over the place. We're going to hit a couple. We got a little Maxime Bernier going on today, along with here's a shocker: church getting burned in Canada. We're going to talk about that. You got some people who are really optimistic about the election, Joe. Optimistic in a way where they think that, like, in other words, they're really like behind, Trump's groundswell and he's growing and Kamala's falling, and yet nobody, and I'm going to say this for the millionth time on this show, but nobody's addressing anything involving election integrity. So don't expect me to get all sorts of excited. All right. But you got Victor David Hanson. You have some metrics that matter. And this is where I will say that if let's say they don't get away with too much cheating. Sean O'Brien, head of the Teamsters, he's got something to say. So we're going all over the place tonight. And we're going to break it down a little bit. But Joe, here's the thing. I watch people like Bill Maher. Here, I do want to comment on those first three funny videos, okay? And I'm glad that Dr. Phil went back at him. Why are conservatives look at the people who hate them as those that we should champion, or people we should get behind? Who cares? Bill Maher doesn't care about me one bit. The only thing he'll say is he respects my right to free speech. So what? Bully for you, Bill. I've been respecting your right to free speech for as long as you've been in the public arena. No, so I need you to say that I can speak free. Screw you. I don't
No,
need you. I don't need you
no,
to come to
I
my.
hear
Why the
you, but
concerns? Well, even Bill Maher said, "Who cares?"
no, but what it is, I think sometimes we have to take, like, sometimes people, even though they're maybe 85% off, and Bill Maher is maybe more than 85% off, he actually said that he would vote for Joe Biden if his head was in blue liquid before he would vote for
Right,
Donald Trump. But
right.
at the same time, which is just simply ridiculous of a statement to make. But then again, he's rich and it doesn't matter who the president is because his money is still green. However, sometimes people say something, frankly, that's good. And when it comes from a voice like that, I think sometimes it's even more powerful. Because to be honest with you, his people don't want to hear that. They simply don't. Because he does have like people that support him. And to a degree, I give him credit for that. Again, I've never watched a Bill Maher show in my entire life. I know what he's about. And frankly, he's a sorry soul. With that said,
He's terrible.
yeah, yeah.
Joe. Listen, it's not a matter of the fact that he's a leftist. He's an atheist. Okay, he has said some of the most disgusting things. Number one, about Roman Catholics. Okay, so that's the first step. How about back in the day when Sarah Palin was running with John McCain? He called her the most vicious names. He wished Dick Cheney got shot. He said it would have been better off, basically, I'm paraphrasing, it'd have been better off if Cheney got shot, because lives would be saved in Afghanistan or something along those lines. He's been the most vicious guy. Okay, if anybody should get their words taken down, it should be Bill Maher. So again, I just go back to that thing where my attitude is this: Bill, I don't need you to back me up. All right, as far as I'm concerned, you could just go in a corner and shout. You know what he is, and I'm going to put a finer point on it. You remember in high school, you went to Catholic high school, I went to Catholic high school, right? And there's always that one kid. There's always that one kid in Catholic high school. He's smoking cigarettes in the quadrangle. Okay. He's got his tie down, even though he could get demerits from the Dean of Men for having his tie down. Of course, he's wearing corduroys. He could get demerits for that too. His hair's a little longish in the 1980s. And he sits there smoking a cigarette. He says, and this is after religion class. He goes, dude, I don't believe all that bullshit. That's Bill Maher. And he grew into that. Okay. And I'll tell you one more thing too. He ain't, and I say this because I don't like him. Okay. I'm not saying it because I don't like him. And I don't like him. Okay. He's never been that funny. He's got a couple good one-liners on his show. His stand-up sucks. Like people compare him to like George Carlin or something like that. And George Carlin was, of course, an anti-Catholic. Bill Maher's stand-up sucks. He did a stand-up a couple years ago. It was like they paid him millions of dollars for this. Anyway, that's enough about Bill Maher. But here's my point. Conservatives need to stop sucking up to people. How about we just stand up for conservatism, all right, and everything that we value supposedly as conservatives, and don't worry about what the left does. If they back you up, they back you up. They don't, they don't. They're not inviting you to the cocktail party anyway. You know what I mean, Joe?
I hear you. I hear you. What are you going to do? Like I said, I try to give credit where credit's due. And ultimately, like I said, sometimes when somebody says something like a Bill Maher, I think people are quicker to listen. They expect to hear that out of Sean Hannity. They don't expect to hear it from Bill Maher. Either one who says it, it's true. And ultimately, free speech is a unifying issue. If you ask me, every single American should be concerned about that, because ultimately it's the cotter pin issue. If people aren't informed, they're not going to know how to vote. And frankly, if they don't know how to vote, the country's finished.
Listen, I'm with you on that. But here's the thing, and then we're going to move on from this. All right. But you said yourself, he's voting for Biden no matter, or he would vote for Biden no matter. He's going to vote for Kamala Harris no matter what. And guess what? His party, at some point, Bill Maher is going to say something that they don't like about him. Let's see what happens when they decide to turn their knives inward. Anyway, you're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Thanks as always for joining us here Thursday nights, 9:00 Eastern time, where we go way in the breach. Please, wherever you're following us, X, Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, hit a button to help us out. Like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. And we have some really great interviews that we've been doing on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. And you don't have to be Catholic to like them, but, they're out there and they're very informative. And one in particular that we have up there right now is with Paul Kengor, the editor of the American Spectator. I highly encourage you to go see that. That's all over the place. Primarily help us out on X. We're really trying to build up on X. So here, Joe, I'm going to play this for you. Then we're going to come back. Speaking of Kamala.
And that doesn't work. So now I think she's at the point that she's in a doom loop. She wants to debate Trump again. She knows she needs to get out more. She knows Waltz needs to get out more, but they know that the more they get out, the more they cement this reputation of being not serious and kind of amateurish and embarrassing. So it's going to be a very interesting last 30 days. If Trump can discipline himself and not get into the personal invective and stay with the issues, turn Vance loose on the talk shows on the weekend, and cut down his rallies, maybe because they expose him to a great deal of danger. And it's in his rallies that he says things. When he's in interviews, like he does very well, actually, in one-on-one interviews, Trump does. But I think you're going to see that Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, and probably Pennsylvania are going to solidify with a 1 to 2 point lead in most of the polls for Trump over the next 2 weeks. And that tells me that given the record of polling in 2020 and 2016 and the increase in Republican registration, that will offset any irregularities in the voting, and he, I think, will win the Electoral College.
Now, did you hear what Victor Davis Hanson said? He said, you see consolidation in those states that he mentioned, Pennsylvania, Arizona, right? Georgia. Okay, fine. And he says he thinks that should be enough to offset any potential irregularities. But the thing that he's overlooking is, but we don't know what those irregularities are going to be. The only optimistic thing, Joe, is because I'm not watching what Trump does. I'm not watching what Vance does, okay? I'm watching what the left is doing. Now, it does seem like they're a little panicky. I don't know if I'm going to throw it over to you so you can tell me if you agree with that part of it, all right? And the level of panicking they're doing, to me, is directly proportional to the amount of cheating they think they could get away with. They wouldn't be panicking if they had all their apparatus in place to actually try to steal the election like they did in 2020. So let me throw it over to you.
Everything he said is right. keep this in mind. Kamala Harris had a 28% approval rating as the vice president. Very liberal pundits criticized her. They could not go with Hillary Clinton because the money was tagged to the Biden-Harris ticket. So they had to prop her up, and they also knew that Joe Biden could not win. So they dumped him. So here we are. The press has propped her up, but to that gentleman's point, every time she goes out, she puts her foot in her mouth. She did 3 interviews this week, and they should have been layups. One on The View, one with Howard Stern, and one with Colbert. And and she also did a 60-minute interview last Sunday. All of them were bombs. All of them. She cannot conduct an interview well. That's why they're not having her go out. But the problem is she has to convince the undecided voter. That's 5 to 7% of the electorate. And people don't know what she stands for.
Right.
So it's like they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. And I want to comment on something that you said. You said that they're nervous. And I'm going to tell you 2 reasons why they should be nervous. One, the Vegas line is now for Trump. Money doesn't lie. They're not going to. That means that he actually is ahead, because no one is going to put, as in Vegas, the money down and bait for political purposes. That's number one. Number two, and I read this article today, you're noticing that they're criticizing the Electoral College. Waltz is now very vocal about that because they know that they're down. That's the key. The more you hear them talk about problems with the Electoral College, the more you know that they're panicking, and that the more you know that they're down. You have to sometimes ignore the polls, because the polls basically are there to sway you. Stay home, don't do this, she's up, she's down. You have to look underneath the polls, and those are 2 metrics that matter. Look to see where the Vegas money is. And the more they talk about the Electoral College being a problem and it has to go away, the more you know they're panicking and that they're down.
And again, I'm gonna take that as a hopeful sign. Hey, you want to hear something funny? You mentioned polling. Literally, Joe, today at work, I get a phone call. Hi, can I speak to Joseph, please? And I'm like, yeah, you got him. Like, I was in a bad mood at work. I was having a bad day at work. So I was like, yeah, you got Joe. What's up? Who is this? I'm so-and-so. I'm calling from the Arizona, political blah, blah, blah way. Do you mind answering a few questions? I got polled for the first time in my life. I actually got polled. And now I know what people go through when they're actually answering a poll. And they were asking me, did I vote? Who did I vote for in 2020? And I said, Trump. Did you vote for him enthusiastically? Not so enthusiastic. Like, it was all these questions for about 10 minutes. And this woman must have thought that I was to the right of Attila the Hun. After I got done, I just went right down the line. But I thought it was funny. I looked at my coworker, Jay, and I said to him, I said, Jay, I finally got polled. I'm 57 years old. And somebody finally asked me my opinion. It's actually not some abstract thing that they say happens. It doesn't happen. I guess in the next poll, I'm going to look at my wife and say, yeah, I was in that one. They measured my response. But here's the thing. And I am going to take that as hopeful, okay? Because like you said, I think maybe there's been enough light put on the shenanigans that went on in 2020 that they probably know they're going to do some degree of cheating. But maybe because there's been such light on it, people are not in the mood this time to get their votes stolen. And I don't think if they tried the same exact thing they did in 2020, they'd be able to get away with it with a bunch of judges saying, no, there's no evidence here. I don't think they'd be able to do it. But on a purely, go ahead, you wanted to comment.
No, I was going to say, even if he does pull off a miracle, and to be honest, he has to win outright, because there is going to be shenanigans because of the electoral laws. It's legal to have shenanigans. 36 states don't require ID. That invites trouble. Yeah. It invites trouble, period, end of story. And they moved a lot of the migrants to swing states. That was the goal. That's proven. It's proven. However, if the margin of victory is too large to basically outweigh any type of shenanigan that's legally afforded in this election because of the electoral laws that were passed. Donald Trump is going to get killed. I'm going to say it again. If Donald Trump makes it to January 5th, I don't expect him to be alive a year from now. I really don't. I don't think I hope I'm dead wrong, and I'm sticking to that. I do not expect him to be alive because they're absolutely dead serious and scared to death of this man, and they're not going to stop.
I think
And that's and I'm just saying that like with all honesty. But I will say this though: if Donald Trump by the hand of God becomes the president and out like maneuvers them, and if Donald Trump is assassinated, that will cement his position because it will give JD Vance a mandate. The country will be overwhelmingly against the radical left. And frankly, that God works in mysterious ways. I don't want that to happen. God forbid that happens. It will be an American tragedy, but it will cement Donald Trump as one of the greatest patriots in the country's history. Like him or not, get used to his name and seeing his face because it'll be all over the place.
Right.
Streets will be named after him. Hospitals will be named after him. Statues will be all over the place. And it will cement his agenda. And JD Vance is a very capable individual, and he will have a mandate, and that mandate will push forward. That I can guarantee. But I will tell you this, Joe Pasillo, if he does get elected, if he does make it to January 5th, and if they do kill him, that is the biggest mistake they will ever commit. And I don't put it past them because they're so blinded by hate.
Well, no, they're definitely blinded by hate. It has to be. First of all, his statues will be up until they allow BLM to rip them down again. That's number one. Joe, I've come to the conclusion. Donald Trump has softened on abortion. I'm going to do an interview tomorrow with Father Stephen Imparato that I'm going to post. We're going to be talking about a post-Roe America as far as abortion is concerned. He's given them what they want on abortion. He wraps himself in rainbow flags. He doesn't give a damn about gay marriage. Okay, he cares about workers. So we've always asked on this show, then why do they hate him so much? It really has to be, and again, maybe it's because they hamstrung him in his first term. It really has to be because I think they're really, really fearful that this time around he rips about 80% of the deep state out, and he's already said, Elon Musk has already said that that's what needs to be done. Here's a guy who's got a thriving enterprise with X, and the first thing he did when he walked through the door, he fired 80% of the people that were working there. Evidently, Elon Musk kind of knows what he's doing. So it's got to be that. It's got to be that it's about power. Leaving aside the fact they hate him or they hated him for his judges and this and that and the other thing. It's about they really feel because now he's going to come back with a vengeance if he gets elected. He's been
Well,
shot.
he doesn't have to get reelected, and they're afraid of that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If he gets reelected, they must really fear that. Yes,
there's no doubt about that.
He's going to put somebody. Go ahead, Joe.
That's where people have to open their eyes to. You see, this election is not about Donald Trump. It's about you. It's about opening your eyes to a government that's at war with you. They're at war with you. And people have to see that clearly. Your neighbor isn't your enemy because your neighbor has no power. You see, this is where people have to see through the fog. We have to get our country back. We have to get big money out of politics. We have to strip down the budget. We have to get rid of the fat. These are things that have to be done. We have to protect free speech. We have to stop being in endless wars.
Can I throw something out there to you? Here was his mistake. And we have a little bit of time. We're covering a lot tonight here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. We have a little bit of time. Let's stay here for a second, okay? His big mistake the first time around was he let the Republican establishment put people in place that were not on board with his agenda. Mike Pompeo being one of them, okay, with him as the head of the CIA. Remember something. Trump was going to release just as an example, everybody out there, Trump was going to release all the Kennedy assassination information. He was going to release it all. He said he would. Mike, the way the story goes, Mike Pompeo, head of the CIA, sat him down and said, "You can't do this. You can't. You can't."
I
No,
saw an interview with Julian Assange recently. He's been out of prison, and he directly implicates Mike Pompeo in trying to kill him. I invite people to Google that interview. He says it was him that tried to have him killed. Now, I take that with a grain of salt. I'm just telling you what he said just to collaborate with what you're basically saying, because I've heard many voices about Mike Pompeo basically not being on the side of the people.
He's a deep state creature, Joe. And
We have to get rid of all of that.
That's what I was going to throw over to you. I want to know what you think. He let the Republican establishment put people in places and he trusted them. Pompeo was one of them. Bolton was another one. Mr. Warmonger himself. Okay. And all these people. Donald Trump, if he gets reelected, he's got to come in. And what he's got to do is he's got to get people that are going into the agencies with the express reason to either A, severely reform those agencies, or are charged with the task of dismantling those agencies. So no Betsy DeVos as the head of the Secretary of Education.
No,
the Secretary of Education.
You can't fix certain things like when they're so broken. Some things just have to be gutted completely. It's like a football team. You got to gut the whole thing, and that's what they're afraid of. They're also afraid of the war machine stopping. Donald Trump had no war, and that's another thing along with free speech that should be a common denominator amongst all Americans. Why are we sending our service men and women into harm's way when our country is a wreck? It's a wreck. The middle of our country is frankly a wreck. The economy's a wreck. People are strung out on dope. We have to get our house in order. Stop sending all this money all over the world. We are not in the position to do it anymore. We have to fix our own house, and endless wars is what the neocons and frankly the Democrats are all about. The Uniparty loves war. We have to stop this, and all people of goodwill should be concerned about that. 1 million people are dead in the Ukraine. And frankly, if you ask me, if we did not push the NATO boundaries in 2014, if we did not support a coup in the Ukraine, which threw out an elected president of the people of the Ukraine and replace him with a tool of the EU and the globalist agenda, this war would never have happened. Putin would never have gone into Eastern Ukraine. In many respects, NATO was the cause of this war. The press won't tell you that, and that's why social media is important. Listen to Glenn Greenwald. We're going to listen to Jeffrey Sachs later on. Another person, I'm not on board with everything that he says, but he's smart. And sometimes smart people who you don't agree with on everything have something to say. We have to keep an open mind and stop just listening to our own echo chambers. Some people like that can tell us something, and you should listen to them and turn off the news because it's a propaganda machine and they don't have your back.
Listen, people could tell you something. Sometimes numbers, Joe Rossinello, numbers could tell you something.
At a problem for Kamala Harris's campaign. Just 28% of Americans think the U.S. is on the right track. And I want you to put that into perspective, right? When does the average, when the incumbent party loses the election, look at that. It's just 25%. That looks a heck of a lot like that 28%, right, that currently think the country is on the right track. When the White House party wins, i.e. Kamala Harris's party, the Democrats, 42% on average think that the country is on the right track. This 25% looks a lot more like this 28%. It doesn't look anything like this 42%. This, to me, is a bad sign for Kamala Harris's campaign. The bottom line is it looks a lot more like a loser than it does like a winner when it comes to the country being on the right track.
Can an incumbent party win with numbers like this?
Yeah, so if we look historically speaking, right, and we say, okay, say the U.S. is on the right track, the incumbent party, when they win. Today, again, it's just 28%. Look throughout history, right? 96, 88, 04, 12, 84. In all of these instances, far more than 28% thought that the country was on the right track. 39 was the lowest back in 1996. We got upwards of 47% in 84. Of course, that was a blowout, right?
So bottom line is this: those numbers did not look like that in 2020. And if anybody thought we were on the wrong track, it would have been because of COVID, not because of the economy, not because of taxes, certainly not because of inflation. See, the press lets them lie. I'm very surprised that was on CNN because that doesn't look good for Kamala. By the way, what I just did was completely racist, according to so many people out there, because I won't pronounce her name. Joe, they're so desperate, they're back to that now. Remember, we used to make fun when we used to do the show in Jersey, we were in your basement. We used to make fun and call her, is it Kamala, whatever. We were having fun. All right. Now they're so desperate, which gives me hope. They're so desperate. They're back to picking on people for putting the syllable, the emphasis on the wrong syllable. But anyway, this is not good for her. This is not good for the Democrats. And it shows you something. It shows you that there's enough information going on out there that the mainstream media does not have the power that they think to paint a picture of the economy as though there's something really, really good going on, because there's not, Joe.
Well, what I would say is this. Now, please keep this in mind. This is CNN saying that, not exactly a pro-Trump network. That was CNN's metrics. No one is going to look me in the face with a serious argument and tell me that she won when their country has a 28% approval rating and she's the incumbent, and you just looked at the historical numbers. If Donald Trump is up at 11 o'clock at night on election night, we all go to sleep and we wake up and he lost the election because 80,000 votes came into Nevada, 40,000 votes came into Pennsylvania, 30,000 votes came into North Carolina. I'm sorry. I'm not going to believe it. And I'm going to tell you this. No one else is either.
Yeah, I was going to say, Joe, this time around, if they try it and you get all these anomalies and these statistical impossibilities, okay, now people, even Republican establishment, let's say the types that stabbed Donald Trump in the back the last time, hold it, Kemp in Georgia, okay, who recently is making real nicey nice with Donald Trump. That happens in Georgia. He might turn around and he might tell the Secretary of State, let's hold it right now. Where did those 25,000 votes come from at 1:30 in the morning?
Well, because the problem is, it's his skin. Is he going to throw himself under the bus for a losing president? No. And ultimately, too, and this is why you have to have election controls. This is basic civics. When a country doesn't believe in an election, i.e., you don't have to show ID. California just passed a law that made it illegal for someone to have to show ID for any election, for the school board up to the president. Why would you do that other than you're inviting for fraud? That is a basic to show ID. You can't do anything in America without having an ID. You can't open a bank account. You can't have an apartment. You can't pick up drugs at the pharmacy for your grandmother. You can't go into a hospital. You can't do anything. And yet California passed that law. Pennsylvania does not allow ID. Well, it doesn't require ID. Forgive me, I misspoke. That's a swing state.
Right.
How? These are basics, and we don't have those controls, and that's done on purpose. If you don't think otherwise, frankly, I'll sell you a bridge in Brooklyn. And that is why the country is going to be unmanageable. And this is done on purpose. And this is where, again, I get frustrated, Joe. Even if you hate Donald Trump, that should trouble you, because you live in the country. And if it's unmanageable, you can't get on your bus to get home from work. It affects you.
Right.
And I don't get it. Listen, I don't like a lot of people that have been elected. I had to endure 8 years of Barack Obama. I was not a Clinton fan. And frankly, I wasn't even that big on George Bush, but I dealt with it because I'm an adult. Even though I don't always act like one, but I am.
Right.
So my point is, you have to do the same thing. It's time to act like an adult. It's time to believe in the basic fundamentals of a country. Free speech. Let's stop getting out of wars. Let's have an election where we don't look like a kangaroo court, a friggin' banana republic. It's embarrassing.
It is embarrassing.
It simply is, Joe.
Well, let me tell you something. We might be spared looking that way. Okay. After this election, one of them is, like you said, like that was a metric that matters. When you look at, let's say, what percentage of the population believes that we're on the right or wrong path. In that case, how many believe we're on the right path? Is a very low number, and that party doesn't win. What also doesn't bode very well is what happened in 1980 when Jackie Presser, who was the president of the Teamsters Union. Now, in another life, I was briefly a member of the Teamsters. My father was a Teamster for 35 years. Jackie Presser was the president of the Teamsters Union, and he caught a lot of crap because he backed Ronald Reagan. He was one of the blue collar, the Reagan Democrats, okay, back then, and helped get Ronald Reagan elected. And guess what? History kind of is repeating itself.
Democrat, but they have fucked us over for the last 40 years. And for once, and not all of them, but for once, we're standing up as a union, probably the only one right now, saying, what the fuck have you done for us?
Yeah.
And I'm getting attacked from the left, you know, and we've given, since I've been in office 2.5 years, we've given the Democratic machine $15.7 million. We've given Republicans about $340,000. Truth be told. So it's like, you know, people say the Democratic Party is the party of the working people. They're bought and paid for by big tech. Those big tech companies.
Yeah, tech is the new fossil fuel, man.
Right?
That's what I say.
Right. And you've got the Republicans who are now saying, hey, we want to be the working class party, right? And okay, you've got a great opportunity right now to do that. And the Democrats, if 60% of our members aren't supporting you, the fucking system's broken. Yeah. And you need to fix it. Stop pointing fingers at Sean O'Brien. Stop pointing fingers at the Teamsters Union. Look in the mirror. I mean, I had a heated discussion 2 weeks ago with Chuck Schumer, and it got fucking ugly.
Chuck Schumer is a piece of shit.
And it got ugly because, you know, these politicians, you know, the one thing I've learned, they fucking walk in and they tell you, I did this for you. Okay, great. Let me tell you what you haven't fucking done for us or our members. And we got into it pretty heavy. And I'm like, you had no problem taking $550,000 from me 3 weeks prior to me going on the Republican National Convention. And then you want to be a fucking tough guy on Twitter or X or whatever it is and throw shit out there about me? Like, whatever.
That's, you know, that's some pretty powerful stuff right there. Okay. Now, Sean O'Brien, he's making a really good point, and he's honest about it. He says, we gave $15 million to the Democrats. We give a few $100,000 to Republicans, okay? And he's right about another thing. Republicans, you want to be the party, of the people, of the working people? Were you guys supporting the longshoremen strike? In other words, now let's say or were you knee-jerk in bed with the corporations that they work for? Union. In other words, they need to start changing. We've said we don't need this Sean Hannity, I worship at the feet of the free market idolatry when it comes to the economy. Okay. People, Joe, I was thinking about this today, even before I knew we were going to be talking about it. All right. It's mind blowing that we as an American people, okay, mostly working people, have allowed corporations and politicians to get away with this. Okay. When any corporation, no matter even privately owned corporations, it doesn't only belong to you because you necessarily has a societal function, because you have people working for you, people who need to earn a living. And if you're not providing a good living for them, okay, then that's really an issue. Hell, they're not even making enough money to buy your friggin' product. Sean O'Brien is exactly right. And I love the fact that he called out Schumer too. And I love the fact that he went on that podcast, very popular podcast, and said that about Chuck Schumer. So one final point about the International Longshoremen strike. and Joe, you could speak to this too. And we both can because we're both from New Jersey. They make it seem in the national media that this was a bunch of guys making $125,000, $130,000 a year, pension benefits in the whole 9 yards, and they're being greedy because they want a cost of living increase over the course of the next, let's say, 5 or 6 years. Joe, let me ask you a question. If you're a father of a family and your wife is at home and you make $130,000 a year in North Jersey, you tell me. You tell me that's enough money to live on. If you live in West Orange, if you live in, let's say, Union or Kenilworth, if you're going, like, if you work at Port Newark, or if you work, let's say, in you can't live in Jersey City, it's too damn expensive. They're making it seem like these guys are rich because they're making $130,000, $140,000 a year, and they want a cost of living increase. In the meantime, you try living in that Essex, Hudson, Union County, New Jersey, and go to work at Port Newark and raise a family with that.
No, I know, but that's just getting distorted. I want to just comment on that particular clip. I want to make 2 points for people. Obviously, traditionally, and he brings that out, the working man voted for the Democrats. It has flipped, and I'm going to tell you how it has flipped. 70% of the wealth of America was contained in the Democratic vote for Joe Biden, is possessed by the people who voted for Joe Biden. And 30% of the wealth of America is in the hands of the Trump voters in the last cycle. What does that tell you? It tells you exactly what Sean O'Brien just said. The Democratic Party is the party of big tech, Wall Street, big pharma, big ag, and the military-industrial complex. The numbers speak for themselves. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Sean O'Brien. Do your own research. That's point 1. Point 2, and this has to get fixed. It's never going to. It would take a revolution for it to get fixed. How and why does Sean O'Brien give $500,000 to one party, or $15 million to one party, and even $300,000 to another? He's buying influence. That has to stop, because that means his vote is more important than mine. They're not giving money because they like them, and that has to stop.
Right.
It has to stop on both sides of the aisle, because that makes us unequal as citizens.
Right.
And if you don't believe me with regard to how the process works, look up some interviews with Tulsi Gabbard, who was the darling of Congress. She couldn't be bought. She went from being someone who was on the fast track to getting thrown out, and she tells you in those interviews what a day in the life of a congressman is all about, how all they do is court money. They're supposed to represent you. If someone gives your congressman money, who are they going to listen to? You or them? That has to stop.
The only way to equalize that, Joe, is you have to have public funding of elections. Tax dollars are actually paying for elections. And I would go one step further. I would say non-corporate tax dollars. The taxes that the American people pay, a certain percentage of which every American who files taxes, a certain percentage is going to go, to the public funding of campaigns. That's the only way my vote is going to equal a vote of a rank and file Teamster member. You follow me on that?
No, I totally get it, Joe. It's got to end.
And you know why they're opposed to it? Because they want that money. Because if you have public funding, guess what? It's like the hardest thing to do is beat an incumbent member of the House of Representatives, because they have all sorts of perks they give themselves, all sorts of things like that. They got people like Sean, and again, I'm not berating him. I like what he said in there, but Sean O'Brien and many, many others coming and throwing money in your pocket. You're right. The only way that makes my vote equal to theirs is you have to do away with all private funding of elections, and it has to be publicly funded. Certain amount of money is allocated for Congress, certain amount of money is allocated for the Senate, certain amount of is allocated for president, vice president, and the like, and that's it. And if you want on a state level, if you want to do private funding, you can do that. But national elections that affect the country,
Well, Joe, this is where people have to connect the dots. And this is why the press doesn't want to have social media. We say we're a we're a republic, a constitutional republic, but we vote. So what that basically says is we're a country of the people, by the people, and for the people. The people have a voice. But do we? You see, when you're talking about money like that, whether it's the Teamsters, whether it's Big Ag, whether it's Big Pharma, whether it's the military industrial complex, no, we don't. That tells me it's an oligarchy. It's a country of the wealthy. All they do is put on a facade. They lie to you, and then they listen to the people who gave them money. That is what is the outcome of that data. That's what you should basically be able to figure out. And that is troubling for everyone. What do you call that? A plutocracy is a government of the wealthy. That is what our country is. Who can give $15 million? What human being? That means he has a voice at the table. Do you have a voice at the table? Nope. And that should trouble people. We have to do away with that. We have to do away with that. We should demand it.
Here you go again. Here you go again. I'm gonna have to push back on you. Here you go again, Joe. Using just way too much common sense. What's wrong with you? Here, I'll give you one. I've been paying. I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild. All right. I haven't acted in I don't know how long, right? But technically, I'm still a member if I paid some back dues. Okay. How about this, Sean O'Brien? Now, I like everything he said, nearly everything he said in that interview, okay, or in that clip. But here's one for you. How about you have to do a secret ballot, okay, amongst all your rank and file members, all of your members right across the board, okay? And they tell you where to allocate their union dues that they pay that you're going to give to a politician. That means if I am a rank and file and I have a secret ballot and I submit my ballot and I say no money for any Democrat candidate, okay? And let's say we have 100,000 members of our union, 50,000 say that they don't want to give to Democrats, 50,000 say they don't want to give to Republicans. Then guess what you got to do, Mr. O'Brien? Chuck Schumer's only getting $75,000 of that $550,000 because you're going to have to give half of that to a Republican because your union members say they won't do that. SAG won't do that. SAG doesn't listen to any of its rank and file. SAG will give money to LGBT, all of it. They don't care how many maybe conservatives there are in the Screen Actors Guild. And one thing about a guy like Sean O'Brien, if he had proposed something like that and said, we're going to listen to our rank and file, we're going to listen to our members. Okay, we're not giving money to anybody anymore, just writing a check. What our members want, and we're going to break it up proportionally based on what our members want. I bet you things would be a lot different. But we do have to keep it moving because, Joe, I don't like Jeffrey Sachs. I think he's a globalist. I think he's an oligarch. But as you said earlier, sometimes you might not like somebody. You might not agree with them on many things, but they are capable of saying things correctly at times.
Worried about both of these candidates, and I'm very worried about the state of our country. I'm very worried about the fact that our foreign policy really is determined by deeper forces. I think what Putin said in an interview with Figaro in 2017 is very interesting. Putin is quoted as saying that by then in 2017, he had worked with 3 U.S. presidents. And he said they come into office with some ideas. But then, as he described it, he said men in dark suits and blue ties show up to explain to them the way things really are. And we know with Trump, Bolton showed up and Pompeo showed up. And they explained how things really are. We should understand in the United States that what passes for our democracy right now is not real engagement of the people, and our elections are completely overblown in terms of what they do regarding America's role in the world, which right now, because of how close we are to complete disaster in global war, is actually the preeminent issue. And we have a deep state problem that is absolutely severe. So I'm not telling people how to vote. I really am not. I'm not voting. So I cannot myself vote for anybody even on an ostensible lesser evil basis if I don't feel that they are meeting the minimum standards for decency as a president of the United States. It's sad.
I don't know what he means by a minimal level of decency, like as far as it goes. Like, okay, is Jeffrey Sachs bringing up Trump on a personal level, like how Trump's lived his personal life? Because as far as I'm concerned, I look at it this way, and I'm going to throw it straight right back to you, Joe. Donald Trump, as we mentioned earlier, now that's funny enough, that's where I saw the Bolton and Mike Pompeo comment was from Jeffrey Sachs. That's why I brought it up earlier. And there were others, by the way, like Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos. And in other words, these were people that were like recommended to Trump, and he kind of bought into it, right? Until, just to digress for a second, until Trump refused to attack Iran, and then John Bolton blew a gasket. Like literally, the reporting was that he blew a gasket and couldn't understand how Donald Trump called it off to the last minute. To me, I would tell Jeffrey Sachs that little story about how John Bolton just blew his top at Donald Trump because he wouldn't attack Iran should show Jeffrey Sachs that Trump actually, that was a very decent move on Trump's part. And his rationale, right back to you, Joe, his rationale was the Iranians didn't kill anybody. They attacked a facility. Nobody died. But you want me to start dropping bombs and missiles and people are going to get killed. And Trump said, I'm not doing it. And Bolton went crazy. So I'm going to agree with Jeffrey Sachs on some of what he said and disagree on others. I think Trump has enough decency when it comes to, how about this? At the very least, keeping us out of foreign wars.
Ultimately, what Jeffrey Sachs echoed is what we just talked about, and it was a great segue into his conversation, is this. Our presidents do not represent the people. You could look at Barack Obama, who ran on many platforms. Barack Obama was for Wall Street. Many pundits will say exactly what I just said. He bailed out the banks, and Geithner was in tight with Jamie Dimon and all the rest. And that's who he made his Secretary of the Treasury. Barack Obama said one thing, he did something else. And I'm just using him as an example. He's not alone. And he's bringing that up. And this is a guy that's in the know. Why do you think the House, which is the people's house, the Congress, always has an approval rating of like 22%? That's supposed to represent you and me, and it doesn't. And that's what Jeffrey Sachs is saying. And that should resonate with people. That has to change. He said it very clearly. The president goes in, they have great ideas, they say great things, and then two guys with suits, blue suits and blue ties, come in and tell them how it really is. No, we tell you how it really is. You work for us. And when both parties are listening to the two guys with the blue suits, I have a problem with you. And that's why I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I will never, ever vote for an establishment candidate again. The country needs to be shaken up and changed. That is a problem. And this is, like him or not, and I don't agree with everything he has to say either. But here's another fact. He's in the know. He's a brilliant man. And frankly, you don't have to agree with everything he says, but we should start listening to smart people. Take the good with the bad when you listen to smart people. Stop listening to Jake Tapper, who's regurgitating propaganda, or George Stephanopoulos, or frankly, Sean Hannity for that matter. They're not telling you anything. They don't connect dots. People have to do their own research and start thinking critically. And until we do that, we're not going to have a voting population that sees clearly and vote in their own interest. And that is what we see time and time again. And frankly, Joe, I bang my head against the wall when I see that. It's sad. It's sad and it's sickening. And
Well,
that's why freedom of speech is vital.
Well, what's sickening more is not because now here's the little dilemma. We sit here and say, okay, going to vote for Donald Trump. I'm in now the lesser of two evils camp, so I disagree with Jeffrey Sachs. I will vote.
I'm voting for him too.
Right, I was going to vote for him enthusiastically. That has changed now. My status is currently I'm voting for the lesser of two evils. I'm going to say anything less evil than the Democrats is significantly less evil because they are so deeply, deeply evil as a party. They forget about just your run-of-the-mill Republican corruption. Okay, they embrace everything evil. So I'll do that. But the measure of it is going to be, and again, this is where I kind of disagree with Jeffrey Sachs, where he talks about decency. You're going to get no decency on the part of the Democrats. They're just about power, Mr. Sachs. Trump has shown he's not just about power. I think Jeffrey Sachs could have given Trump a little bit more credit.
I would agree with that. But you know
Joe,
what it is, though, Joe? Jeffrey Sachs is worth probably $100 million. It doesn't matter who the president is. Like for you and me, the price of milk matters. You see, Jeffrey Sachs doesn't matter.
Well, I'm just talking about. I know what you're saying, Joe, and I agree with you on that. My thing is that he, on the level where he said, I'm not voting for either candidate because they both lack a certain level of decency.
I hear you. I disagree.
And I don't know
there.
if he's still, again, I don't imagine Jeffrey Sachs is bringing Donald Trump's personal life into this. Like if you want to talk about divorces or shenanigans in his personal life, decency as president, Trump showed, I thought, a tremendous amount. I mean, was he decent when he slapped tariffs on foreign countries that were taking advantage of us? Was he decent when he was looking out for workers and trying to protect them? Was he decent when he told Ford, if you close down shop in Detroit and go to Mexico and try to ship your car back, I'm going to slap a 30% tariff on it? Those are decent things, I think. And yes, keeping us out of war, deliberately keeping us out of war. Okay. And I believe Trump that he would be, I do believe Putin would come to the table if Trump was president and end that in the Ukraine. I do believe that Trump could broker a peace. These are decent things. I don't think Jeffrey Sachs is giving Trump credit for. That's my only criticism. I mean, I understand his point of view. Our politics is so debased. Okay, for a lot of the reasons you said earlier, because too much money is awash in the system. It's hard to find good people, even though there's some good ones out there. But I think he's off on that. I think he should go vote for Trump, especially since Jeffrey Sachs is a social liberal. He should have no problem voting for Donald Trump. But we got to keep him moving because, Joe, I know how much you love Canada.
How dangerous a moment do you think this is in terms of world history, where we are right now?
Actually, we are making history right now. And us in Canada, you in UK, with Nigel and other politicians over there who are fighting for our freedoms, for our way of life. And in the state with President Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., something will happen in November. I don't know what will be the result of that election. But, if you look at the data, the economic data in Europe, in United States and in Canada, these are big deficits. And the creation of money out of thin air. We have inflation. You have inflation in your country. Inflation is very bad. It's a tax. Our standard of living is going down. So, we may have, at the international level, a new monetary order. So all that is happening at the same time when these governments are crushing our rights. So it's an historical time. We will change that together. It may take a couple of years, but we will be there. And actually, as the politician, being in that time and fighting for what is right, it's, I think the history will look at us, freedom fighters, and saying, oh, these guys were there against these crazy ideologies that these leftists are pushing to us.
How about you, Tess? How much of a challenge do you think we are in right now in terms of historical context of the world?
I think there are great challenges, and one certainly, needs to be aware and recognize that humanity is in grave danger. And
I'm not interested in listening to the chick. I'm sorry. Okay. I played that clip for Maxime Bernier. Now, again, he's a threat. See, he's not. I like Pierre Poilievre. I like Pierre Poilievre, particularly because he goes after the press in a way that I like. The same way when Trump looked at them right in the face and said, "You're the enemy of the American people." See, this is one of the reasons why the left hates Trump, is because he, in this case, I will say I enthusiastically supported Trump because he said things like that, knowing that you and I and many people like us were saying the same thing. You are my enemy. Jim Acosta is my enemy. Jake Tapper is my enemy. 99% of legacy media personalities. You are my Joy Reid is my enemy, not because I want them to be my enemy, because they've made us their enemy because they hate regular, just normal, yes, God-fearing people. Okay. So Trump told them that. Maxime and Poilievre, as I alluded to, is very good when it comes to that. He's very plain speaking. If I had to vote for Poilievre or Maxime Bernier, I'm Maxime Bernier. Because see, he's bringing up things that I haven't heard. Maybe you have. Poilievre say, talking about things like the collapse of the international monetary system, okay, or the replacement he's alluding to there of a digital currency. Okay, trying to get our houses in order. That's what he's alluding to. He's basically sounding like Trump, and on that level, and I applaud it.
I found that interview interesting on this level. You have some people from the UK, you have some people from Canada, and they're facing the same dilemma, and that dilemma is globalism. That is not a coincidence. We're facing the same issue. They're just in a more advanced stage of it. And if we get Kamala Harris as the president, it will advance further in America. Count on that. That is not a coincidence. We have to, as Americans, pay attention to what's going on globally, what's going on in the EU, what's going on in France, what's going on in Holland, what they're doing to farmers, how they're pushing a green economic model, which is taking the economies away from oil and gas, which is destroying the middle class. You heard Maxime Bernier. He says our standard of living is dropping. The same is happening here. It's just happening at a more advanced level. That is not a coincidence. That is not some type of conspiracy. That is following an economic trend. And Americans should pay attention to what's happening in other Western nations, because it's going to get more accelerated here. And that is a fact. Anyone who is in the middle class that votes for any politician, Republican or Democrat, that is for a green economic agenda, you are not voting in your own economic interests. When you go away from oil and gas, presently, I'm all for moving forward progress. It can't be at the accelerated rate that it's at. The reason why it is because these people worship at the altar of the climate cult, and it's destroying regular people. It is. You're not voting in your own interests, meaning the food that you feed your children, the clothes that you put on their back. And if you don't believe me, look at what's happening in the UK. Look at what's happening in Canada. Look what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. I'm not lying to you. And this is where people have to, again, connect the dots and pay attention. No one on the mainstream media circuit is talking about that. That's only gotten from social media, and there's a lot of smart people out there that can inform you. I'm nothing special. I just don't listen to the mainstream media. And if you find the right sources, you too will be an educated voter. And frankly, you should vote your own interests, your children's interests, and what's in your refrigerator and what's not in your refrigerator.
Yeah. And here's another thing they won't show you.
Hey, ça fait des méchantes photos. Hey, ça fait des méchantes photos.
You know how many churches have been burned in Canada?
And is that a coincidence?
No.
Like, again, this is, again, how isn't that a hate crime? How isn't that a hate crime?
Well, in the eyes of the oligarchs, it's not a hate crime because you're
No,
attacking
that's
the Catholic
exactly
Church.
right, Joe. That's exactly right. And just like what's happening in America at basically clinics that help women, many of them are poor. They give out diapers, they give out baby supplies to these women, and somehow the radical left, and it is the radical left, they're vandalizing these centers all across America.
Oh,
And
by
I
the
can
way,
give you,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of the things I heard that's going to be a big push if Kamala becomes president and has the House and Senate, she wants to shut down crisis pregnancy centers.
but this is, again, that helps poor people. It's
Right.
not just about basically discouraging people from having an abortion. It also helps women that have children that don't have money and they need diapers. Diapers cost $50 a box. I have 5 kids. I know how much they cost.
That's right.
Many poor people can't afford them, and they give them out for free, and they're being vandalized all across America. And here you have Canada, they're burning churches. To Joe's point, this is not an isolated incident. Where is that covered in the news? Where is the outrage? Where is the DOJ? Where is the FBI? Nowhere to be found or heard.
Right. Right. Right.
And that should trouble you. You see, that is the type of stuff. Again, I bang my head against the wall, Joe. We're supposed to be Americans. Listen, I'm not for a synagogue being burned. I'm equally as appalled if they burn a synagogue or a mosque. I'm not a Muslim. Leave them alone. Leave the Jews alone. They're free to worship and they're free not to worship. You have no right to do that. And that should bother you. And the government, that should bother them. But it doesn't. And
Nope.
it's real. And it's happening in Europe too. And it's happening here. And that should trouble people, all people of goodwill.
Well, remember one thing, and we'll end with this, Joe. You're talking right now about a population in the United States, 25% of which thinks that Donald Trump should have been killed by that bullet that was shot at him in Butler, Pennsylvania. So
I
what
did
do
hear that. I did
they-
hear that.
They will not. They're not going to pull. They're not. Look, these people are all in on abortion. They're all in on the radical left agenda on all of it. If they could kill Kristen Hawkins and Lila Rose, Father Stephen and Barato, I'll be talking to tomorrow. Okay, and then I'm going to be posting that all over social media. We're going to be talking about a post-Roe America. Listen, Joe, we've said before, we'll say it again. We mentioned it last week, the week before that, and all the way going back to 2018. We're dealing with Marxists. Marxists don't care about human life. Marxists are lost, warped, evil, demented people who have a hatred for humanity, primarily because they have a hatred for themselves. Okay. And they project that onto other people. I'm a miserable bastard. Therefore, I'm going to take it out on you and I'm going to hate. So they hate all institutions, particularly religion. Okay, particularly the Catholic Church. They do not value democracy or even a constitutional republic. They think we're all just a bunch of people who, like many of them say. Bill Maher, we started the show with Bill Maher. Bill Maher said, well, abortion is kind of murder, but I'm okay with that because we have 8 billion people in the world.
That's such a twisted statement. That's so twisted, it's absurd.
Isn't it twisted? And he would say, I'm not a Marxist, but I would say, well, you sound like one because, see, that's the way Marxists talk. Okay, Marxists think that a deer is more valuable than a human being, particularly an unborn human being. They think an eagle's egg should be protected by the law, and there's a clip of this online. Protected by the law, but a baby in the womb has no protections. We are dealing with evil. We're not dealing with misguided politics. See, that's where Sean O'Brien is right. I'll applaud him because probably every generation of Irish people, his Irish ancestors that came here probably voted Democrat, and he's saying, Republicans, you want to be the party of the working man? I'm ready to vote for you. Okay. Point is, we need to just keep calling them out for what they are. They are Marxists. They need to be confronted, as every pope since communism is coming to existence, going back to Leo the 13th, Pius the 11th, Pius the 12th, Benedict the 12th, excuse me, Benedict the 15th, all anti-communist. Bishop Fulton Sheen, anti-communist. We are an anti-communist. We should be an anti-communist country, and we definitely should be an anti-communist church. Communism is not to be tolerated, and that is what these people represent. At the end of the day, I wish people would get it through the head. That's why 25% of our people, Joe, we're hoping Donald Trump got killed. Joe, give me 30 seconds on a final word.
All I would say is this. I think people have to look to alternate sources to get their information. And this is why freedom of speech is so important. It's a common denominator, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. We have to protect freedom of speech. It's the cotter pin of any democracy. And if you're not for freedom of speech, Hillary Clinton once again doubled down on CNN this week and said that they have to basically curtail how people speak, or quote unquote, we will lose control.
Yep.
Hillary, I want you to lose control, because the control should rest with we the people. And when it doesn't rest with we the people, that is a problem. That's where we're at, and that has to change.
Absolutely. So everybody out there, stick around for an extra 2 minutes after we click out, because we got we're gonna send you off with a video from Jon Voight. Thank you again for following us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, for tuning in. As you always do, we had all of our favorite people in the chat room and a couple of new ones. Remember, on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Remember, we go live Thursday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern time. And we have our interview shows that we do for the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. We have those with some fantastic people on some fantastic topics. Those are all over our social media pages. So please like, subscribe, share, do all that. Stick around for our final clip. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We love you, and we will talk to you soon.
Americans, we're now in a time of the darkest plague ever. And our chance, our only chance, is this November to vote for the President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, for 2024. There are a lot of my peers putting out videos trying to brainwash the American people to do the most dangerous vote ever. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. They both are the lowest and most vile choice that you can trust with your life, your children's life. They will destroy the American dream. They are corrupt. And my fellow Americans, they will turn the beauty that once was thriving into a prison of darkness with criminals killing and stealing. Let us bring our country to her glory. Let her thrive like Abraham Lincoln once achieved, the union of people, the dream for all. You must see the lie and vote for the only one who will save our country and make her safe again, thrive again, bloom again. Donald J. Trump. My friends, if we don't, your dreams will be voided with lies. You will regret your choice. The people of America are losing their dignity, their morals, their common sense. This is the worst time of our era. You can accomplish your dreams, your goals, your love and honor for yourself, your family, if this country regains her strength. This, my friends, can and will be by voting for Trump 2024. Much love to you.